Well, thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here. This is my third BALLE conference in the last 4 years, and yeah, I don't know. It's just what a great organization, and I got really choked up watching the BALLE video. So, and what an honor to come after all of these amazing people I've seen both yesterday and today. So, thanks for having me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about just the story of Etsy. Etsy is actually turning 10 next week. So it's been an exciting 10-year journey. I'm turning 40 a couple weeks after that. So it's these new decades, these things are happening. I was going to use slides, but then I thought I wouldn't, and now I'm kind of wishing I was, but it'll be fine. I'm going to roll with it. We'll see where it goes. So yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about the first 10 years of Etsy. I'll share a little bit about the experience of going public, which has been interesting, and a bit about what we're doing with Etsy.org. And then that will be a pitch for a session we're doing tomorrow, where you can learn and also give your input into what we're trying to do. So 10 years ago, actually well, more like 12 years ago, I was living in a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Fort Greene. I now live about 4 blocks from there in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. My roommate at the time was a guy named Rob Kalin, and Rob had just finished at NYU, where he was in the Gallatin program, so he'd designed his own major. I think it was philosophy and something else really impractical. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was making furniture, a lot of it actually in the apartment. It was really funny. He had a wood saw in his bedroom, and he would just kind of sleep on top of the wood, the sawdust. And I was in a band at the time, as was just mentioned, and gotten into screen printing, actually, because I made my own T-shirts. Other bands liked them. And they're like, hey, can you make ours? And so I was like, yeah, okay, why not? And I'd learned screen printing by just reading things online. I have no formal training in that. And so Rob was making furniture in his bedroom. I was making T-shirts in mine. And I would wash out the screens in the bathroom, and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, would be mad because thered be ink over everything. It's actually, I still find ink on lots of my clothes. I don't think I'm wearing any today, but so we had these creative pursuits. I was playing in the band, making the T-shirts, and Rob, it's actually one of my favorite stories of how kind of Etsy came to be. Probably because Rob was making furniture in his bedroom, he didn't have enough money to pay his rent. And he went down to our landlord's office, which was right across the street from us, to basically say he couldn't pay the rent. He goes into our landlord's office, and there's a proposal for a website on our landlord's desk for a restaurant that he owned. And it was exactly twice the amount of money that Rob owed in rent. And he said, I'll make that website for half that amount of money. And the landlord's like, sweet, great. And, the reason I mention that story is that Rob had never built a website in his life. Yeah. And actually, I think that gets at the kind of the true spirit of an entrepreneur. He went out and he got an HTML book that day and built that first version of the website. Remember, the thing he was really proud about, the website, was a mouse over, and showed an empty picture of the restaurant, and then you moused over it, and it was full of people. He's like, yeah. Like, that was the height of technology in 2003, I guess. But he also wanted animated flames on the website because it was a Cajun restaurant, and he didn't know how to do that. It wasn't in his book. So he posted something on a NYU bulletin board, and 2 computer programmers responded, and they became the first 2 programmers of Etsy. So the 3 of them actually started a web design business called IOSpace, because Rob was like, wow, you can make money making websites. This is amazing. And so, so actually the next site they made was for a professor from NYU's wife. And she had a website called Get Crafty. And they redesigned, it was just a forums, really, for people who made things. And they redesigned the forums, and Rob was making now handmade wooden computers. And he wanted to, he sold 3 of them to a local cafe in our neighborhood. And he's like, wow, people want my handmade computers. This is so cool. I'm going to build a website and sell them online. But then when he was looking at Get Crafty, and he was looking at, everybody he knew was making something. And he didn't want to sell the stuff that he made on eBay because he actually really cared about how it looked, the work that had gone into it, and he felt that eBay was just like, oh, I've got these CDs or sneakers I don't want, let me put them on there and get rid of them. And these were actually things that he really cared about. And so when he saw actually that there were tons of people who were making things and no one really had an outlet for that, he said, oh, I won't make a website just for my computers. I'll make a website for everybody who's making things. And so that was the idea behind Etsy. So I think maybe about 3 months, Rob Christenheim built that first version of Etsy in our apartment. And then I remember launched it on June 18th, 2005, so just about a week from today or whatever. And I remember the launch was timed to coincide with the first Renegade craft fair in Brooklyn. And we screen printed these little invitations to an after party to celebrate the launch of Etsy, and then went around the craft fair and passed them out to each booth. And then the party was at our screen printing shop, which was up the street, and nobody came except one person. I remember it really well. And so it was like me and Rob sitting on the floor with this poor woman who decided to be brave enough to come to the Etsy launch party. Anyways, so that was funny. That was 10 years ago. So the website launched. Rob said, why don't you come and work on this with me too? And I said, I was getting ready to leave the band and getting married, which also means my 10th anniversary is coming up. I gotta remember that too. Thanks for reminding me, everybody. How much time have I got? I should probably speed up the story. Rob said, why don't you come and work on this too? And I said, I'm not a programmer. I don't really know what I would do. And he said, well, you can be the marketing guy. And I said, I don't know anything about marketing. He's like, perfect. And I think that's actually been a really good thing, that none of us were really coming from traditional business backgrounds, because the more we learned about business as it was practiced predominantly, the more kind of confounded we were, and the more like, this seems really awful in a lot of ways. And so I think that probably, like Danceco, helped to create a really unique culture that was really coming from a very intuitive place, rather than, we've done the financial projections and we see a lot of opportunity in the craft and hobby industry. It wasn't that at all. It was just a need that we felt ourselves and wanted to help other people who were making things too. I remember Etsy to this day takes 3.5% commission from each sale. And the 3.5% was not the result of some financial modeling. Rob has asked me, he said, how much is eBay? And I said, I don't know, I think 4%. He's like, we'll be 3.5%. Like, that was it. And I remember a lot of our artists that I've talked to over the years have been like, couldn't you have just been 5? It's so hard to do the math, And so actually, the business model hasn't changed significantly for Etsy. It's still 20 cents to list an item for 4 months, 3.5% commission when that item sells. So we launched 10 years ago in June. I think that first year we sold a couple $100,000 worth of goods. The next year it was 7 million, then 27 million, then 90 million. Last year was around 2 billion, which is kind of crazy. But very important to remember, that's obviously not what we make. That's actually, the gross sales of all of these small businesses that are working on Etsy. And there's about 1.2 million artists who are actively selling on Etsy, 90% of whom are women, actually. So, when we were starting out, there wasn't really this strong kind of social mission to Etsy. It was just, our mission was basically our motto: your place to buy and sell all things handmade, even though we always had vintage too. So, but that was kind of the idea behind it. And as we started to have more meaningful economic impact in people's lives, it changed the way that we were thinking about the company a lot. My marketing, thankfully, was not advertising. It was really about going out and trying to have relationships with the people who are using the site and learn from them and figure out how we can actually create something of value for them. And over the course of all those conversations, I started to realize actually that Etsy, unintentionally, was actually becoming an important force for economic development in a lot of people's lives. And it was not just financial, actually. It was also, the capital that's created when you share something that you're really proud of or that you love with people, or the extra amount of time that you can spend with your family or away from a job that you really hate. And I started realizing that Etsy had the potential to be something much more than just a marketplace for handmade goods. A big turning point came in 2007. As a company, I think we were maybe 15 people, 20 people, I don't remember exactly. We all read Deep Economy by Bill McKibben, and that to me was a real light bulb moment. I didn't really know anything about new economic movements or anything like that. But when he was talking about, the importance of local living economies and connection to your community, I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is actually, what Etsy can help build if we do it the right way. A year after that, someone sent me Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher, and that really has kind of set me off on a path that's changed the way that I think about a lot of things, and also changed, for me, what the purpose of Etsy was all about. So 2000, actually, I think it was maybe 2010, end of 2009, I moved to Berlin to start opening up our offices in Europe there. The next year, as we really started to have this social mission cement for Etsy, we decided to rewrite our company mission. And I was searching around online for language, and I actually stumbled across the BALLE mission. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that's how I met BALLE, and actually invited Judy Wicks to come and speak at the first Etsy conference ever in Berlin in 2011. And that moment was actually also really important for us, because it's when we shifted the way we thought and talked about Etsy from being a marketplace for handmade goods to a platform for small businesses. And to build this platform, not because we think it's a great business strategy, but to actually build a world that we want, to use business as a tool for regenerating more human-scale economies. And I also had my first kid in 2010, and that led me to lots of soul searching. And I said, okay, I know that what I need to do in this world is actually, make it better than it would be were I not here, and use whatever resources I have to actually try to do that. And I started thinking that, okay, I'll run for political office, I'll run a nonprofit, which is weirdly, I guess, what I'm doing now. But I realized I'd never have the chance that I would have with Etsy, the reach, the audience, the platform. And so I really made my mission to be about how can we use Etsy as this engine for impact in the world. And kind of like Mandy was just saying, I think historically a lot of businesses have said, okay, well, we do, what we do over here, but we use some of that money and we give it to art museums and we clean up parks, and that's awesome, And that's really not what I wanted. It's how is business itself the engine for impact. And I think it was people like Judy who really inspired that message in me. Hi. So we changed the mission of Etsy that year. We had some really long version of it, which was Etsy is the marketplace we make together. We enable people anywhere to easily build and directly exchange with independent creative businesses. We envision a new economy where self-sufficiency, well-being, and durability are the key measures of success. Now, I wrote that, and I made it super wonky, and I'm the only person in the world who remembers it. But so we knew we had to make it a little snappier. And so the mission became reimagine commerce in ways that build a lasting and fulfilling world. And that's Etsy's mission to today. And, that's what it's really about, is how do you use business as a tool for building a world that's sustainable, not just ecologically, but socially economically, culturally, I don't know, all forms of capital, and one that's more joyful, more connected. And so, sorry, I got distracted by that. 5 minutes, okay. So that's been how we've been thinking about Etsy, and of course it applies to the culture that we try to create at Etsy, which I think is really unusual and very special. But also to the work that we're doing now with the foundation. So I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to quickly just segue to a little bit about the IPO, because I know that was, a lot of people had questions about that. And then I'll tell you about the foundation. So the company, as I mentioned, did around $2 billion in sales last year, or all the small businesses on Etsy did. We're around 685 employees now. And we had raised about $92 million of venture capital, which in some way kind of wrote the future for us in terms of what we were going to do. And I think the paths that were available to us were acquisition or go public. And the way I think about IPOs, and I should mention that like Dansko, we're a B Corp. There's one other B Corp that's public, Raleigh Software, but at the time it wasn't even included in the S1 because it was such a new thing. So I think we were among the kind of most prominent companies to go public a few months ago. And I had very mixed feelings about that as a path for Etsy. I think a cautionary tale that I would offer to businesses that are earlier in their lifespan. Just be mindful about the money that you need, and don't take it if you don't need it. I feel like our investors were great and have been really supportive, and I wouldn't say that in any way that they were detrimental to Etsy, but there's an expectation that comes with venture capital around growth and scale and all of these things. And so when you take it, you're signing up for that on some level. The IPO itself, thankfully, I didn't have to do too much work on. It was a ton of very brutal, mind-numbing work for lots of people. But at its core, it's really about a fundraising event for the company. And I kind of think of it two ways. It's someone who's much wiser than I am, and I don't actually know who it is, so I can't say. I heard this secondhand from Chad, the CEO of Etsy. He said an IPO is like a wedding, and everyone gets all excited about the wedding, but you need to focus on the marriage. And that's really how I think about it. The IPO was a fundraising event. It returned money to the investors who put the money into the company. And, where I'm focused is not on that event, but on what we're going to do with the money that we raised and what it's going to mean for us for the long term. And I think we were really very clear in our S1 and in all communications around this that we're planning and building for the long term, and that we are not going to work to maximize short-term returns or be swayed by what the stock may or may not do. In fact, for me, I've used the IPO as a way of actually practicing non-attachment to things and not viewing the stock or even letting it say where it is, because it'll go up, it'll go down, and it doesn't matter. You have to focus on actually what you want to do in the world. So I'm happy to talk more about that. I've got 2 minutes now, and I do want to talk a little bit about the foundation. So the last thought on the public thing is, it doesn't change what we value and what we're trying to do in the world, and I hope it never does. And I think that the question time will tell if, if people are going to take a long view or not. And I feel pretty confident that the leadership that we have in place there is committed to our mission. The other thing that the IPO did was actually provide funding for a new foundation. And when I knew it was an opportunity when we raised some money when we went public to fund something. So we gave a bunch of stock to this, as of yet, kind of just very nascent foundation called Etsy.org. and tried to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do with this? And we took the mission, reimagine commerce in ways that build a lasting and fulfilling world. We said, okay, well, if we want to reimagine commerce, reimagine business, then we also need to reimagine how we're teaching business and what we're teaching to people, and probably most importantly, who we're teaching. And so what I'm working on now with one colleague, Erica, who's here somewhere, is building a new kind of business school that equips people or fosters in people the human capacity, the skills, and probably most importantly, the wisdom to build businesses that regenerate the community, the self, the planet. And I think to really do something regenerative, you have to focus on that personal development as well as that shift in consciousness, that changing the systems view of, or rather gaining an understanding of the systems of the world and your relationship to them, and actually building something that's true of your essence and honors the people and places where you do business. So we're excited to be collaborating with BALLE on that, and a bunch of others. And I know I'm out of time now, so thank you very much.